We still have room in the freezer, so I thought I'd stop by quickly. Kroger for mince. I looked at the face of Kate, my wife of 20 years, as she spoke through the open window of the luxury 40-meter motorhome. This may be our last car camping trip as a family. Our daughters are starting freshman year in 6 weeks at the University of Texas at Austin, and everyone was looking forward to this trip. Kate seemed a little distant lately, and I thought this trip might be a chance for us to bond again. There would be opportunities for our daughters to have some alone time together, and I was hoping for some intimacy. With my wife, what we have been missing so much lately. It won't take more than half an hour, so I don't see a problem with it, I replied. We took our time and left ourselves enough time to get from Fort Worth to Amarillo by mid-afternoon. I was loading luggage into the outer compartment of a huge motorhome. Everything that might be needed this evening was already stowed away in the internal storage areas. Taylor and Kendall, our 18-year-old twin daughters, were sitting in the living area of the motorhome, texting with their friends. They won't see their friends for a month. For young people, this is an eternity. Guys and girls will break up, get back together, and break up again during this trip. Breaks among friends will begin, will heal, and will start again. The daily drama of a high school girl's life will continue without them for a whole month, and only the electronic link of a cell phone will keep them updated on all the events they miss. We towed our Toyota Highlander so we could do road trips and excursions while leaving the camper at various campgrounds as a base. Hopefully, these adventures will distract them from the events they are missing. Okay, I'll make a list so we can get in and out as quickly as possible. She pursed her lips and made a kissing sound. Love you, honey, she said, turning away from the window. This morning she was wearing black yoga pants, a black top, and white tennis shoes. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a ponytail, and her only makeup was natural lip gloss. At 5'11" inches, she was naturally slim with breasts proportionate to her body. She was only 5 pounds heavier than her college weight when she played for the University of Texas women's volleyball team. She was beautiful in a girl-next-door way and glowing with thoughts of her upcoming vacation. When I first suggested the trip, it seemed reluctant, but that reluctance has grown from a reluctant acquiescence to a growing desire over the past few weeks. We haven't been out in the RV since the pandemic started, and the girls were almost as excited to see the southwestern United States as they were to see Disneyland when we got to California. They inherited their mother's physical attributes, but both shared my aptitude for mathematics and logic and leaned toward engineering as a career, just like their father. But first and foremost, they were teenagers looking for fun. I had just put the last bag in the outside luggage compartment when I was startled by the squeal of brakes as the red Mustang stopped, its nose almost touching the rear of the motorhome. The young man jumped out of the car and quickly walked towards me. He appeared to be between 20 and 25 years old. He had blonde hair and a blonde mustache, was about my height at 6'2", but looked in better shape than me. He looked muscular and toned, whereas I had developed a daddy belly in the 20 years since I graduated from college and marriage. I was 20 pounds heavier than my college weight and recently started running again to lose the weight. As he quickly approached me, I saw the anger on his face. "Where is she, bastard?" he shouted at me. I took a step back, stunned by his fury. Katie, come here. I'm taking you away from this cruel bastard," he shouted. I must have looked confused and worried about this psychopath showing up on my doorstep, calling me names and shouting at my wife. "Who the hell are you?" I shouted to him. I was preparing to attack in case this madman rushed at me. "Where's Katie?" he asked again, this time with even more aggression in his voice. I started feeling sick to my stomach because of this. My daughters got out of the camper, and I saw that they were filming the whole thing on their phones. My wife got out of the motorhome. She was deathly pale, and her face seemed frozen with shock. She seemed unable to speak at that moment. "Katie, come on. I'm taking you away from that cruel bastard. You won't have to worry about him anymore." He extended his hand to my wife. "Let's go." My daughters came to me and stood on either side of me with their arms around my waist. "Mom, who is this guy? Why does he call Dad cruel? Kate didn't answer Taylor's question. She looked at the stranger, then at me, and again at the stranger. Her gaze was a mixture of shock and fear. Her mouth was open, as if she was trying to say something, but nothing came out. "I'm Kate's fiancé," he answered my daughter. "We're just waiting for your divorce to be finalized so we can get married." I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly. I tried to calm down. An explosion wouldn't do me any good, especially with my daughters recording it all. "Mom, what is this man talking about?" Taylor said, and Kendall looked at what was happening with eyes that seemed to exceed the size of her face. "Kate," I said softly. She just looked at me, face frozen with fear. "Kate," I repeated, "is it true? Do you know this guy? Are you engaged to him?" My wife just looked at me. Her eyes did not seem to understand the situation that presented itself before her. I've seen this to a lesser extent in previous situations with Kate. "How long have you been dating my wife?" I asked the stranger. For the first time since he got out of his car, he seemed unsure. 9 months. We started at the beginning of the school year. So he was a teacher, just like Kate. By his looks, he's probably a high school coach. She told me all about how you manipulate her and the kids, and how emotionally abusive and almost physically abusive you are to them. I'm here to get her away from your crap. "Our father is not like that," Kendall said. "If our mother really said that, etc." "Oh, she's lying to you," said Kendall. "Mother, did you say those things about Dad?" "Let me explain," Katie said. She was finally able to speak, and the first word that came out of her mouth was a rogue word. Taylor and Kendall's faces showed disgust. "Explain what?" Taylor screamed at her mother. "Are you having sex with this guy? Are you cheating on your dad?" Tears rolled down the faces of all 3 women. I shook my head. No need to explain anything. I reached into the luggage compartment and pulled out Kate's suitcase. I placed it in front of my wife's groom. "She's all yours," I said. I turned my daughters towards the van. "Come on, girls. We will still have time to get to Amarillo by evening." My daughters glared at my wife, turned their backs on her, and walked toward the door of the van. They turned at the same time, extending their middle fingers to the mother and her lover. Kate grabbed my hand. "Peter, please don't leave me." Despair radiated from Kate in waves. Her lover stood helplessly. Everything did not happen as he expected. He saw himself as a white knight coming to her aid, and was now faced with the idea that the damsel in distress could be a dragon in disguise. "Don't throw us away. I need to be away from you. I will contact Terry and begin the divorce. Find yourself a lawyer and give Terry his contact information." Terry Carr was my college roommate, and we remained close friends for almost a quarter century. Although he did not practice family law, he had many connections, and I knew I would be in good hands. Kate fell to her knees and began to cry. An hour ago, seeing her in this state, I would have been destroyed. Now, not so much. My daughters settled in, and I pulled away from the side of the road. In the mirror, I saw Kate covering her face with her hands, and her boyfriend awkwardly placing his hand on her shoulder as he watched the van drive away. Driving from Fort Worth, Texas to Amarillo, Texas on State Highway 287 is about as boring as driving anywhere in the United States. Miles of nothingness until you reach the emptiness of Wichita Falls. I remember an article in an old issue of Texas Monthly that I came across at my grandparents' house. The article lists the 10 worst jobs in Texas. Come at number 9, chicken sexer, a person who examines young to determine sex. Number 10, as a resident of Wichita Falls, Texas. We didn't stop in Wichita Falls. After Wichita Falls is Quanah, Texas, named after the great Comanche chief Quanah Parker. Born into the family of a white woman who was captured by the Comanches as a child, Cynthia Ann Parker, and her Indian husband, Comanche Chief Pettinacona. We had lunch in the small town and walked around the town square while I took photos of the girls in front of the Quanah Parker Monument at the county building Hardeman. Cynthia's story served as inspiration for the John Wayne film The Searchers. Another reason my daughters took on more than their mother did was because we appreciated classic films. In the weeks leading up to our trip, we watched several classic films, including The Searchers and Paul Newman's HUD, filmed in Claude, Texas, which we'll pass through shortly before arriving in Amarillo. When we left, all three turned off their mobile phones. I knew one of two things would happen. Either we would receive a barrage of calls and messages from Kate begging us to come back for her, or there would be radio silence as she realized that she was now free to leave us and her life and be with a new love. Throughout her life, no controlling, abusive husband or daughters to burden her. Freedom. A ride as boring as 287 gave me plenty of time to think things through. Driving a van, albeit a huge one, 40 feet tall, was a dream. The van wasn't actually mine. It was a joint purchase between my parents, Guy and Tony Conroy, and their best friends Dawn and Emily Franks. My mother and Emily Franks have been best friends since 8th grade. They dated twice at their high school prom and roomed together at North Texas State University in Denton, Texas. It was at ENSU that Tony Peterson met a shy law student named Guy Conroy. They dated for several weeks before Guy and Tony introduced her best friend Emily to Guy's best friend Don Franks, another law student. 2 years after graduating from law school, Guy married Tony and Don married Emily. Less than 2 years after graduating from law school and within 6 months of each other, both couples gave birth to healthy children. A boy named Peter after Tony's family, the Petersons for Guy and Tony, and for Dawn and Emily, a beautiful blonde angel they named Catherine, after Emily's mother. Catherine was inevitably shortened to Kate. Memories of Catherine began before I even remembered knowing her. There was never a time when she wasn't in my life. The first time I saw Kate naked was when we were less than a year old and our mothers put us in the bath together. This is a photo that I still shake my head at. Today, parents would be arrested for a photo like that. We were each other's first. There is no experience that we would not share. Every action from the first ice cream cone to the first roller coaster ride, the first day of school, the first kiss, and the first time we made love. We went to the University of Texas together, me for engineering school and Katie for a literary studies degree and teaching certificate. I took a job at an aerospace manufacturing company in Fort Worth, and Kate went to graduate school at ENSU, our parents' alma mater. Over the next 7 years, Kate earned her PhD, received a doctorate in literature, began teaching at Fort Worth Community College, and gave birth to our daughters. After Kate settled into a teaching career, I made the decision to start my own business. During my time at an aerospace corporation, I had 6 patents. I had hoped to take all 6 patents with me, but in arbitration, it was decided that 2 of my parents were work products and belonged to my previous employer. However, my 4 patents were considered my own and were not work products, and I had the right to use and license them as I saw fit. I licensed 3 patents and decided to start a production company to create a 4th. Even though there were 2 of us, we were intertwined into one. Together, we were better, stronger, and happier. We were destined to be together forever, while we were away. This wasn't the first time Kate had lost her way. 5 years ago, she had a miscarriage. The pregnancy was a joyful surprise, and once the initial shock wore off, we were beyond excited at the idea of a 3rd child. Katie was prescribed antibiotics for an impacted tooth, which our doctor explained was likely affecting her pills. Whatever the reason for the miracle, we were over the moon. 3 months into her pregnancy, Kate began having severe cramps while teaching a gender identity course on the works of Hemingway and Fitzgerald. She excused herself and left the classroom, went to the restroom, and in the stall of the girls' restroom across from her class, her pregnancy froze. Repeated calls to me went to voicemail. I was in a clean room without a phone, so she called her mother, but she couldn't get through either. Her next call was to my mom. She hurried to be near her daughter-in-law. Kate didn't feel the need to call an ambulance, and when my mother found her sitting at her desk crying quietly, they walked to Emily's car and drove to the hospital. Her doctor told her there was nothing physically wrong with her. Sometimes the body rejects pregnancy. Perhaps there was something wrong with the fetus, and that is why the miscarriage occurred. If she wants to try again, there is a good chance that the next pregnancy will be full term, although nothing is guaranteed. Kate didn't want to risk another pregnancy. She asked me to do the procedure, and I agreed. Our family of 4 was enough for me. But this event plunged Kate into depression. The happy and lively girl I grew up with has disappeared. All forms of affection on my part were rejected. She became increasingly distant. She didn't want to talk to me about it and reacted violently when I mentioned that she needed to see a therapist. She stayed away from her friends, and her social media went silent. For months, I tiptoed around her, afraid of saying the wrong thing and causing her anger. I spoke to our mothers, and they said to give her time, and she will be back to normal. I wasn't sure. And then suddenly, she seemed to get better. She started texting and posting on Facebook again, and I started to see glimpses of the old Kate. Just when I thought things were looking up, Kate came running through the door one Saturday afternoon screaming that she was looking for Taylor and Kendall. She was almost in a panic. Her eyes were wild, and she was terrified. "What happened, Kate?" I asked. I grabbed her shoulders to calm her down. "What's going on? Why are you looking for girls?" "I need to talk to them. I need to explain something to them. I think they might have misunderstood something." She looked around in every direction except at me. At that moment, my daughters entered the house and approached her. "Have you told him yet?" Taylor asked. "Of course not," said Kendall. "Otherwise, Dad would be furious and yell at her." "Girls, let's talk about this in your room. This is none of your father's business. I don't know what you think you saw, but you're wrong." They both looked at Kate in disbelief, then turned to me. We were leaving the movie theater at the mall. We walked right past the line for Maria Montoya's new movie, and what do we see? Our mother kissed some bastard, in public, in the damn mall. I looked at Kate with deep frowning. "Kate, what's going on? Are you cheating on me?" She burst into tears standing in the kitchen. "She saw us looking at her," said Kendall. "She ran after us, but we hid in Engstrom's store and lost her. We came home to tell you what we saw before she could lie to you about it." "You're cheating," I stated emotionlessly. No, I'm not cheating on you or having an affair," she answered without looking me in the eyes. "Who is he?" "He's just a friend," she replied. "I want to know his name," I said. "I want to know which of your friends thinks it's okay to kiss my wife." "I won't tell you," Kate said. "I'll tell him it can't happen again. We can be friends, but we can't do this again." "Bullshit. Tell me his name right now, or the next time I talk to you will be in a divorce courtroom." Kate turned pale, and her mouth fell open in shock. "You can't be serious. You would divorce me over a friendship that went too far." "Try me," I said. "Go ahead and test me. Refuse to tell me his name and see what I do. Try it." "It's broken." She mentioned his name, Kevin Saunders, and the fact that he was a visiting professor at her college. He gave her a shoulder to cry on, which led to inappropriate conversations, which led to texts being exchanged, which led to topless photos being sent. Fortunately, no faces. Although the same could not be said about the photograph of his manhood sent to her. I told her to pack her bag and go to her parents. I didn't want to be around her now or in the near future. Kate was crying too much to drive, so I drove her. Her father, Don, was working in his yard and should have realized something serious was going on. His crying daughter had just been dropped off with an overnight bag, and her husband, who was like a son to him, left with barely a wave of his hand. To her credit, Kate was honest with her parents. Then, when my parents were called, she was honest and apologized to them too. She was adamant that the kiss was all that happened. When asked how far she would have gone if the girls hadn't seen her at the mall, Kate looked concerned. "I hope nothing would have happened. I hope I would have come to my senses and realized that I was going down a dark road with no good ending. I just thank God that the girls saw me and it was all over." Kate did not delete their messages, and these messages confirmed that they did not have sex. I had no illusions. If she hadn't been caught, she would have slept with him. I was kind of naive about cheating before this, but I quickly became knowledgeable. I became a regular visitor to online forums dedicated to infidelity and betrayal. I learned a whole new vocabulary and set of acronyms and abbreviations. app is the cheating partner. BS is a devoted spouse. WW is an unfaithful wife. And what is an unfaithful husband? OBS is another devoted spouse. Day D1 is the day you found out about the affair. Day D2 is your second day D, which usually comes from incremental truth because your WW isn't telling you the whole story because they're in self-preservation mode. So you do a 180, which is a form of communication that is 180 degrees different from your normal loving communication. No inappropriate conversations. Only home or child care issues are discussed. The goal is to get out of the affair, either through reconciliation or divorce. Then there were other sites. Cheating sites that used acronyms such as for married men. The secret of treason is hidden behind compliance scope operational security, as if the secrecy and deception required to betray a trusting partner were CIA techniques. But I studied. I missed the signs in the lead-up to Kate's emotional cheating and was grateful that it didn't turn into physical cheating. I remembered that a few weeks before D-Day, she started turning her phone away from me when she texted. She also took the phone with her into the bathroom and slept with the phone under her pillow. All these signs seem obvious now, but when you love and trust someone, you become an easy target. The consequence of her little adventure was that I insisted that she quit her job. If she wants to teach, let her teach in a high school or middle school. She also agreed to full transparency on all electronic devices. No passwords. No communication apps other than Apple's standard text app. No deleting texts. Location is always on. I provided her with an old iPhone so she could log into her apps so I could control them. I kept this phone with me and set my password on it. If she started cheating again, I wouldn't hesitate to divorce her. She agreed to everything. And gradually, I began to trust her. I started checking my iPhone clones several times a day for messages, calls, and location. I logged into her Apple App Store account once a day to check for downloaded apps that could be used to cheat. Not just dating apps or social networks, but also innocuous games that could have internal messaging functions. I checked phone bills and compared the data with what the clone showed. She also began teaching in high school. She was the only teacher in the school with a doctorate, and having Dr. Catherine Conroy on staff was a prestige for the school. Kate hoped to one day teach at a university. Her idea was that she could teach a couple of courses a semester and use the time in the office to work on her novel. Her emotional infidelity ruined those plans, and while she understood that, through her own fault, she was now teaching full-time at a high school with minimal opportunities to write a novel, she also resented me for it. We were trying to deal with her hurt and the consequences of her infidelity when, 18 months after the first incident, we received shocking news: cancer. During a routine self-exam, Kate discovered a small lump in her right breast. Because he was small, she wasn't too concerned, but she still scheduled a mammogram and consultation. The mammogram led to a biopsy, and the biopsy led to a diagnosis of breast cancer. Kate's mother and grandmother had mastectomies due to breast cancer diagnoses. In her grandmother's case, the operation was too late and she died. Kate's mother, Emily, made the decision to have her breasts removed after her mother was diagnosed, and after tests revealed she also carried the BRCA1 gene for breast cancer. Testing showed that Kate did not have the gene and therefore did not plan to have her breasts removed, as a lumpectomy would have been sufficient. Still, her diagnosis left her deeply shaken. Kate has always been proud of her body and her breasts. Even after breastfeeding 2 children, they remained firm, size 3, without a hint of sagging or stretching. The idea of having her breasts surgically removed plunged Kate into a depression from which she was barely able to emerge. She was distant and unhappy with me and our girls. The slightest irritation caused her to react completely disproportionately to the situation. This went on for months until one day she seemed to wake up and become the Kate we loved again. It brought back memories of what happened after the loss of her last pregnancy. Depression followed by a sudden return to normal. I hadn't touched the iPhone clone in months, but I took it out of the drawer, charged it, and prepared for the worst. And what did I find? Nothing. No messages to unknown numbers. No photos or videos sent to anyone else. No suspicious applications were downloaded or used. No questionable search history. It seemed that through therapy and sheer willpower, Kate was back. Of course, now I know that I was deceiving myself. I taught her to be a better cheater. I checked several times for secret phones. He checked the pockets of his coat, which had been pushed deeper into the closet. I checked shoe boxes and the shoes themselves. Nothing and nothing. I checked under the seats of her car, glove compartment, console, and trunk. I checked wherever the phone could be hidden. The only place I couldn't check was her classroom at school. If she hid a secret phone at school, it was beyond my ability to find it. Kate did not use her phone or computer in anything that I could see or access. Despite all my vigilance and knowledge in matters of infidelity, I was truly stunned when her lover showed up at our house. The drive from Cana, Texas to Amarillo was low-key. We were lost in our thoughts about what happened this morning. The girls knew that we would get a divorce. They caught their mother cheating on the first occasion and begged us to save the marriage. The second betrayal was much worse than the first. It lasted longer, was sexy, and led to Kate falling in love with her fiancé. God, just the thought of it made me furious. The fact that she lied to him about our relationship hurt me so deeply that I could barely think about it. Not only did she discuss me with some bastard, but she also lied about me in the process. I can tolerate a lot, but I have never been and will not be cruel, either physically or emotionally. We didn't plan to stay in Amarillo. We planned to stay at Palo Duro Canyon State Park. Palo Duro is the second largest canyon in the United States after the Grand Canyon. Our plan was to stay in the park for a couple of days and then continue west on I-40, which includes a significant portion of Old Route 66, passing through Tucumcari, New Mexico, to Albuquerque with trips north to Santa Fe, and then back south through Indian settlements before reaching Flagstaff, Arizona. From Flagstaff, we'll head north to Las Vegas for 3 days and then continue west to Los Angeles. We plan to spend a week in Los Angeles, visiting Disneyland, Universal Studios, and all the other tourist spots in Los Angeles and Hollywood. From Los Angeles, we will travel north along the Pacific coast to San Francisco. We planned to spend a few days in the area, visiting Fisherman's Wharf, and now that the girls were 18, Napa Valley and Sonoma Valley. From there, we'll take I-80 through Salt Lake City, Cheyenne, then through Nebraska and Iowa to our next big stop, Chicago. We planned to stay in Chicago for a few days to check out the shops on Michigan Avenue and attend a game at Wrigley Field. We were looking at a maximum of 5 days in Chicago, but if we felt that wasn't going to work, we were willing to leave early. From Chicago, we'll head south to Nashville for a couple of days, and then to Memphis for a day or two. I wanted to see Graceland, and after watching the movie Elvis and Austin Butler's performance as the king, the girls were completely intrigued. After Memphis, we will continue southwest through Arkansas and end the trip back to Fort Worth, Texas. This was supposed to be a month-long, epic road trip that would create a lifetime of memories for all 4 of us. As the saying goes, man plans, God laughs. Kate and I visited Palo Duro Canyon as children. It was on a joint family vacation, which, in principle, describes every vacation we have. We explored the canyon and climbed various trails, including the climb to the lamp, the famous rock performance, which is the most famous symbol of the canyon. We also saw the musical performance Texas at the outdoor amphitheater in the canyon. This was the first live musical performance we had seen, and we were delighted. The play is a story about the pioneers of the early Texas Panhandle, with singing and dancing, ending with a fireworks display. Seeing this performance in the early at a young age, both Kate and I fell in love with musical theater, and that love continues to this day. The twins fell in love with theater thanks to us, and both participated in school musicals. Luckily, they sang like their mother and not like me. After hooking up the RV, we decided it was too late to go camping, so I fried some hot dogs and opened the container of potato salad. I started allowing the girls 1 glass of wine or 1 beer with dinner, but only at home or with their parents. They both chose wine and looked at me with serious expressions. "I think this means divorce," Taylor said. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. Why did she do this to you? To us? And why did she lie about you? She told that guy that you were cruel. Dad, you're probably the kindest person I've ever met, Kendall added. I doubt Mom can explain why she lied, Taylor said. I took a sip of my beer before answering. You're right, T. I doubt she could explain it, but I can. I paused briefly before continuing my thoughts, but decided that the twins were already 18 years old and I could talk to them like adults. They are adults, and I will talk to them like adults. No one wants to be the villain in their own story. There is such a thing as the victim triangle. There must be a victim, a savior, and a persecutor. Cheating and betrayal go against your mother's core beliefs. To justify her actions to herself, she needs to paint me as the villain, not herself. If she is the victim, it makes me the stalker and her boyfriend or fiancé the savior. Your mother knows that I am a loving, faithful partner who has forgiven her in the past. She needs to portray me as controlling, cruel, and manipulative. A victim, not a villain. Like I said, no one wants to be the villain in their own story. The girls nodded their heads thoughtfully. Taylor nodded. For Mom to be Snow White and that idiot to be a prince, what do you have to be? A huntsman? An evil queen? I nodded. One of them. Both. I don't know exactly, but soon that won't be my problem anymore. I pulled my iPhone out of my pocket. I'm going to check my messages. You girls stand back in case he explodes. They both giggled and took out their phones as well. When my phone turned on, it started going crazy, ringing, vibrating, and flashing, receiving messages, missed calls, and voicemails. I should have blocked Kate immediately before leaving Fort Worth, but I didn't, and now I'm suffering because of it. I quickly corrected this omission. I also deleted her messages and voicemails. There were a few messages left from my mother, Kate's mother, and her father. It's strange that there were no messages from my father. My mother's messages began with a concerned tone and then became increasingly unbalanced. Mom, Pete, call me right away. I'm worried. Mom, Pete, call me right now. It is important. Mom, Peter, I want you to call me right now. Mom, damn it, Peter. You need to stop this nonsense and call me. Mom, damn it, Peter. It would be better if you called me right away if you value your skin. Mom, okay, so do you want to play? This won't end well for you, I promise. Wow, I thought. I wonder what her voicemails sound like. The answer was just like her messages, only more and more angry and aggressive. Her first voicemail set the tone, and they just kept getting worse and worse. Mom, Peter, your wife is hysterical. You need to handle this right now. She made a mistake. You need to put your pride aside, put on your big pants, and take care of your wife. Mom, Peter, I'm ashamed to call you my son. You left your crying wife with a stranger and went on vacation. You're pathetic, and I'm ashamed that I carried you for 9 months. I played the messages on speakerphone so the girls could hear them. To say they were shocked is an understatement. They were shocked and upset. I can't believe Mimi said such terrible things to you, Taylor said. Kendall turned pale and cried openly. I think now we know which side she'll take. The messages and voicemails from Kate's parents were not as angry or hostile as those from my mother, but it was clear that they were upset and angry, and obviously I was the source of their anger. There were no texts or voicemails from my father. It was strange. I deleted all the messages and voicemails, and then watched the girls delete theirs without listening to them. We then turned off our phones and looked at the fire, thinking about what a terrible day it had been. We had a wonderful time hiking the canyon the next day and saw the show Texas that night. The girls loved the show, and it was just as cool as I remembered. We spent 2 days in Amarillo and then got on I-40 and headed west. We expected 4 weeks of vacation, but in reality, we were on the road for 5 weeks. Some of our trips planned for 1 day took 2 or 3 days. In the end, we realized that we needed to return home. The girls needed to be in Austin the following week to be assigned to dorms and register for classes. The original plan was for us to rent a U-Haul and hitch it to my pickup truck to transport the girls' things to their dorm. They had to share a room the first semester, so it was a fairly easy move, at least until their mother decided to ruin our lives. My father was sitting on the front porch of our house when we arrived. I looked around but didn't see Kate, her parents, or my mother. Since his motorcycle was in the driveway, I knew he was alone. I got out of the motorhome, stretched, and walked up to the house. "Dad," I said. "Pete," he answered. "What's new?" He grinned. "I'll assume it's not a serious matter." "Not really. Are you alone?" "Yeah, they don't know about the GPS in the RV, and Dawn knows computers like your grandmother, and she's been dead for 10 years. They don't know we're back." This shocked me. I was ready for war and came home to nothing. "No, I decided to keep it a secret. Were all your phones turned off?" "We bought some burner phones in Flagstaff. The girls wanted to stay in touch with their friends, but I needed to stay in touch with work and Terry." He nodded. "Well, Terry did his job. She was served with divorce papers last week at her parents' house." "I guess it didn't go smoothly," I said. "Boy, that's the damn understatement of the year. Kate has been in the mental ward ever since. Her parents are furious with you and the girls and basically everyone except Kate and your mother." "Where is dear mother?" I asked. After listening to her voicemails, I know I'm not her favorite person. "Neither of you are," he nodded towards the twins. "She's so angry at all three of them that she can't even formulate a coherent sentence. This whole week has been a show with the Tijuana donkey." "I'll explain later," I told the girls. I saw that they were going to ask about the show with the Tijuana donkey, and this was not the conversation I was ready for. "Your mother is at home," said the father. I looked at him in bewilderment. "At home?" "At home," he confirmed. "I filed for divorce too." We interrupted our conversation after this shocking news to unload the camper and then clean it. We then cooked hamburgers for dinner and chatted about our trip. We avoided the subject of Kate and her lover, as well as my mother and other grandparents. I told the girls I didn't mind if they wanted to see their mother, but they refused. They wanted to know what their friends were doing, and after dinner they promised to be back by midnight. I grabbed a bottle of Milam and green bourbon, 2 glasses, and a couple of cigars and went out to my dad's patio. I poured 2 fingers of bourbon for both of us, and then we went through the cigar-lighting ritual that most men learn at a young age. We smoked and drank in silence, watching the shadows of the night. "So what happened?" I asked. My father took a sip of his bourbon before answering. "She was always very close to Emily and her family. Sometimes I thought she was closer to them than to her own family, to me, you, and the girls. When all this happened with Kate, I expected your mother to take your side and will be angry with Kate." "And it didn't happen," I said. He shook his head. "Not at all. She was furious at you for leaving, furious at the girls for leaving with you, and furious at me for saying I didn't blame you. I didn't see her messages to you at the time, but I saw them later. I heard her leaving you voicemails. I was unhappy with what she said to you, but then I didn't see the point in adding fuel to the fire. I know you, and I know that after the last time she had an affair, you were ready to leave her." "Did you know about the first case?" This surprised me. I didn't tell anyone. "I heard Kate, Emily, and your mother talking about it a few months later. I know it could have been much worse, but it was bad enough. But not as bad as it is now. After a few days, it became clear that your phones were disconnected. Find My iPhone wasn't working, and you weren't responding to messages or voicemails. Every day was worse than the last. Kate spent hours crying and screaming. Her parents became increasingly desperate, and your mother became increasingly angry and hostile towards you, me. A week later, her parents locked Kate up in the psychiatric ward at Methodist Hospital. They were afraid she would kill herself. It really didn't help that that idiot was still around." "What?" I asked in disbelief. "Was her lover still in the picture?" The father nodded. "He kept saying that he wouldn't leave her, that he wouldn't leave her like her bastard husband." My father looked at me with an apologetic expression. His words, not mine. Well, isn't that wonderful, I said. I tried to convince him to leave, but Emily and your mother wanted him to stay. Honestly, I don't think Kate wanted that, but she was in a state of collapse, so I don't know what was going through her head. In the last conversation with your mother, I said that this bastard has to leave or I will leave. What did she say? Don't make me choose between Emily's family and you. You might not like it. Damn it, I sighed. I always suspected that she preferred Emily's family to hers, but to put it bluntly like that. The next day, I moved into one of the condominiums that the firm holds for clients. I also asked Terry Carr to recommend a divorce lawyer to me. I didn't think it was right to use yours. Afterwards, we sat drinking bourbon and smoking cigars, pondering our future lives in silence. 2 marriages destroyed due to infidelity, one directly, the other as collateral damage. I agreed to meet Kate at her parents' house. My condition was that the meeting be between the 2 of us only, no parents, and definitely not her lover. Kate has always been a beauty, tall, slender, and fit, blonde with a light tan. She always looked at least 10 years younger than her 42 years, and this incident didn't change that. My heart sank when she opened the door. Both her parents' cars and my mother's car were missing when I arrived. 2 hours before my appointment, I drove around the block and saw all 3 cars in the driveway. I also noticed her lover's car, which was parked on the street 2 houses away from her parents' house. 2 hours later, at the appointed time, I drove around the block and saw his Mustang 2 streets down. My mother's car was parked behind him, and there were 2 people in the car. Wonderful. Hey, honey, Kate said, opening her arms and moving toward me for a hug. Stop, Kate. I don't want you to hug me. I entered the living room and sat down in an armchair. I usually sat on the couch with Kate when we visited her parents, but now I didn't want to give her the opportunity to sit next to me. She sighed and sat down on the sofa opposite me. Honey, we have to get through this. We have too much love to throw it all away just because of my stupid mistake. A mistake? Getting engaged to another man while married to me a mistake? I shook my head. I'm here to discuss the next steps in our divorce. Terry Carr says you haven't given him the name of your lawyer yet. It's because I don't want a divorce. I want you. I think we can save our marriage. Fix, I know we can save our marriage. I love you and I know you love me. We can do whatever we think of. What about your fiancé? Don't you think he has anything to say about this? I asked ironically. He's not my fiancé. Yes, I had an affair with him. It was wrong and I regret it. I like him, but I'm not in love with him. I only love you. Are you still seeing him? Kate didn't look me in the eye. She focused on her hands and began to twirl the wedding ring. He came to check on me. How often? Once? Twice? Every day? Every day? All day? Kate began to cry and became visibly emotional. You left me, she screamed. You drove away and left me crying in our front yard. He was there when you weren't. So, let's get this straight. You went to him because you were upset that I left. And the reason I left was because you cheated on me with him. It's like the old joke about the child who, on trial for the murder of his parents, asks the judge to show mercy to the poor orphan. Yes, but it's all over with him now. I don't see him anymore, she said. So if I get in the car and drive around the neighborhood, I won't see him 2 streets away, sitting in the car with my mother. Kate's eyes widened when she realized that I didn't believe her lie. I stood up and said, Kate, get a lawyer and give his contact information to Terry. You can marry a jerk, and I can move on with my life. We'll see each other at weddings and funerals, and in the end, we'll be out of each other's lives forever. You'll just be someone I was once married to. She looked at me with horror. She turned white as paper. No, no, I can't. Never see you again. Kate began to sob. She wrapped her arms around her upper body and began rocking back and forth, repeating, no, 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 no. I stood up and looked sadly at my ex-wife. Shaking my head, I left the house. I drove 2 streets further, stopped next to the car, and rolled down the window. His window was already down. I looked at my mother sitting next to him and saw undisguised hostility in her eyes. "I just left Kate, and she's a mess. You better go and check on her. I'm done with you." I headed home. Nothing is easy, and I didn't expect divorce to be any exception. Kate hired a lawyer, a virtual pit bull named Donna K. Rafferty. DKR, as it was known in the media, was known for securing the largest divorce settlement in Texas history when Dallas socialite Paulin Pickett, née French, filed for divorce from oilman Danny Pickett Jr. and received $270 million. Everyone and their brother warned the younger one about Paulin, because everyone and their brother had tried Paulin at one time. But the younger one was not like his old man. I knew I was in for a fight. At first, they demanded family therapy. I refused. The problem is not with the marriage, but with my wife. This led to nothing but a court order for 10 sessions, which I had to pay for. I could choose a therapist, but that was little consolation. Dennis Lampriere advertised himself as a marriage and family therapist specializing in betrayal trauma. His online reviews were amazing, and he was on the court-approved list. My initial phone interview with him went well. It wasn't until Kate and I sat down in front of it that I realized this probably wouldn't go the way I'd hoped. "Mr. and Mrs. Conroy, what do you want to achieve in these therapy sessions?" I mentally added to my list of demands that Kate return to her maiden name. I made a mistake. I had an affair with another man. I feel terrible and want to find a way to overcome my mistake and use it to build a better, stronger marriage. I looked at her in disbelief. She's still seeing that idiot. She's engaged to him, damn it. Dennis warned me, "We try to avoid yelling and profanity in these sessions. Please remain calm and respectful of each other." "Kate, is this true? Are you actually engaged to another man while saying you want to save this marriage?" "The truth is, Brian asked me to marry him. I told him no, I want to save my marriage." I looked at Lampriere. "Would you say this is classic branch clinging?" "Why do you think so?" he asked. "She doesn't want to commit to a boyfriend until she's convinced that our marriage is hopeless. But she doesn't want to commit to a marriage until I agree to be her husband. It's clinging to branches, pure and simple." Kate chose this moment to intervene. "If you promise to stay with me, I'll tell him I can't marry him. I'll give him the ring." I just stared at her for a minute. The very fact that we are discussing whether you accepted another man's proposal of marriage shows how bad our marriage is. "When was the last time you slept with him?" Kate began to twirl her wedding ring. At that moment, I realized that this would be complete nonsense. "I don't remember," she said. "Come on, Kate. No one will believe this. You're a smart woman. You have a doctorate. You know exactly how many times you slept with him. When was the last time you slept with him?" "This morning," she said quietly, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, Pete. It happened this morning." I stood up, nodded to the therapist, and walked out the door. I knew it wouldn't be pretty, and it was. In an attempt to make me see reason, they tried to take everything I had. Business, patents, all. At this point, I just wanted to leave. The girls began their studies in Austin. I moved them to the dorm, much to their mother's dismay. I declined her request to join us. She turned to the twins, and they said no too. They had no sympathy for her and wanted to communicate with her as little as possible. I blocked my mother, so I didn't know if she was trying to contact me, and I didn't care. My parents' divorce was finalized long before mine. My mother had a good job as a CPA, so child support was not an option. My father gave her the house, and since it was long paid off, she had minimal expenses. She agreed to leave his law firm partnership alone, and they went their separate ways. My father felt he could no longer work with Don Franks, so he exercised an option that forced Don to either buy out his interest or dissolve the law practice. Don bought out his interest, and my father moved to Austin and became an associate at Bonham, McLeod, and Garcia, the oldest law firm in Texas. Ultimately, Kate and DKR exhausted all ways to drag out the divorce. I signed the house to Kate. I sold my business for a pittance, mostly the cost of the land, building, and equipment, and gave Kate half the proceeds. Kate also received half ownership of my patents. I went a step further and agreed to transfer the patents to her in full, provided that this was all over and she signed the documents. Any obstacles they put in my way, I gave in. There will be no more attempts to extract additional money or property from me. This is the end. Finito. All. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. By the time the divorce was finalized, I had also moved to Austin. I bought a condo in Lake Travis within walking distance of many restaurants and shops. The girls came several times a week for dinner and often brought their friends. They often used the pool at the condo complex, and on any given weekend, there would be a lot of girls in bikinis coming in and out of my condo. I was amazed at how many helpful young people there were in Austin. Every weekend I was asked to help with any projects around the condo. Of course, it had nothing to do with the fact that there were probably half a dozen girls in swimsuits nearby. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, my twins, my father, and I were sitting on the deck of my condo enjoying a glass of wine. I made grilled kebabs and rice pilaf with salad for dinner. I saw that something was bothering the girls, and finally I asked them directly what was wrong. "Mom called this morning," Taylor said. "Oh, how is your mother doing?" I asked. "She found out that the patents you gave her are worth virtually nothing. It turns out that some new company called PTK Inc. has patents that make the old patents outdated. All companies licensing them allow old licenses to expire in order to license new patents. Nobody has ever heard of PTK Inc. It is simply an amazing coincidence that the first letters of Peter, Taylor, and Kendall spell out the name PTK Inc. They both laughed. I simply raised my glass of wine in recognition of the fact that I have very smart daughters. "But that's not the reason she called," Kendall said. She had tears in her eyes. "She's getting married next Saturday and wants us to come to the wedding." I shook my head slowly. "Who would have thought?" I said into the silence of the night. There was no answer. My daughters wished their mother luck in her upcoming wedding, but explained that they would not be attending. They did not approve or want to have any relationship with her new husband. They said Kate was upset but understood their decision. Mom fully accepts her guilt in the destruction of her marriage. She knows that it was the biggest mistake of her life. "Besides Pop," she said with a nod towards her grandfather, "our grandparents supported her and encouraged her. I can't understand why they are so hostile towards you." My father finally spoke. "It's because you turned your back on their little princess. Don't get me wrong, I loved Kate, or at least I did before all this happened. But she was always spoiled. First by her parents, and I include your mother in this group. Then you. She never learned to be an adult. She was always under someone's care. She shouldn't have married this guy." But of course, the wedding took place. As the daughter of a prominent Fort Worth lawyer, the wedding made the gossip pages. It was not mentioned that the bride had a first husband or that she had adult daughters. It was also not mentioned that the bride tried to commit suicide on the night of the wedding. On Saturday night, while Kate was marrying Jerk, I settled down on my deck with a bottle of Garrison Brothers small batch bourbon and a cigar. I was in a melancholy mood and took my guitar with me. I rarely played the guitar and only sang in the car or in the shower, but when I'm feeling down, the guitar invariably appears along with bourbon. I hadn't touched a guitar in over a year and was stumbling around trying to play the intro to Guy Clark's La Freeway. This is a song that I could play in my sleep, but now it was difficult for me. I had just played the song non-stop with minimal errors when my phone started vibrating, and vibrate again. So several calls came simultaneously from the twins and my father. I rejected my dad's call and answered Taylor's call. "Dad, did you hear?" she asked without greeting or preamble. "About what?" "Wait, Kendall, I left you a voicemail." I heard Taylor shout to her sister, "Kay, I have Dad on the phone." Then to me, "Dad, I'm putting you on speakerphone. Okay, we're both here. Mom tried to kill herself tonight." I heard Kendall crying in the background as Taylor tried to maintain her composure. What's happened? She took a whole bottle of sleeping pills. It was during her wedding reception. She snuck out, went to her room, and tried to kill herself. Emily and her mom went looking for her and forced the hotel staff to check on her. Otherwise, she would have died. I exhaled slowly. I knew Kate was ruining her life with her actions, but it was bad. Very bad. Good thing she has family nearby to help her get through it. Bad for her new husband. I was sad for my ex-wife, but as they say, not my cows, not my pasture. Can we go with you? They asked. Are you going tonight or in the morning? I was taken aback by their question. I don't plan on going there at all. I don't wish your mother anything bad, but she fired me from my job of being her husband. If you don't want to drive, I'll buy you plane tickets and take you to the airport. I'm sure then your grandparents will be able to pick you up. They were unhappy and expressed their feelings. The next morning, the four of us were on I-35 heading north towards Dallas. I was surprised that my father wanted to go. He said he wouldn't miss this show. I dropped my dad off at the Hilton to check us in and took the girls to the hospital. The secretary directed us to the waiting room, and the first person I saw was Jerk, sitting alone and looking glumly at the floor. My mother saw me and came up with fire in her eyes. "It is your fault," she said. "All you had to do," was all she managed to say before my daughters stood in front of her. "You better fuck off, you old crazy woman," Taylor said. "Yes, go away, Mimi," she said to Kendall. "This is all Mom's fault. She lied and cheated on our dad. She got engaged to the man she cheated with. She kept seeing him, pretending she was trying to get back together with Dad, and then she married an asshole. And then she tried kill yourself. So, dear grandmother, explain to us how this can be our dad's fault." My mother seemed to fold in on herself and sit up, starting to cry. Emily sat next to her, and they cried in each other's arms. Don't put his hand on my shoulder. "It's not your fault, Pete. Everything that went wrong was either her fault or our fault. We should have kicked that idiot out the first time he showed up after you and the girls left. It's our shameful omission that we let him stay." The idiot glared at us while we discussed him. "What will happen to her?" I asked Dawn. "We'll take her home and find her help. She urgently needs therapy." "I'll take her with me," the jerk said, standing up and turning towards us. "She is my wife." "Fuck you," I said. "She may decide to come to you one day, but today is not that day." Don stepped between us. He explained that Kate would go home to her mother, where she would be looked after. If Kate wants to continue to be married, she will be able to make that decision once her mental health improves. The idiot didn't like it and left in a rage. Soon after, my daughters were allowed to see their mother. They returned to the waiting room 15 minutes later and hugged me, crying quietly. "Mom wants to see you, Dad," said Kendall. My mother, Emily, and Dawn looked at me with hope in their eyes. "You're welcome, Pete," Dawn said. "This will help her." I shook my head sadly. "I can't do that. I'm not related or a friend. I'm just the person she was once married to." 3 of them started crying as my statement hung in the air. I turned and left the hospital. 4 days later, we returned to Austin. Before we left Fort Worth, I discussed with Dawn what had happened since I moved to Austin. When Kate and the jerk learned that the patents, which I handed over to them, were worthless, their plans quickly collapsed. Kate imagined that her lifestyle would change little. The idiot thought he had a golden ticket, a beautiful wife, and a thriving production company. He was planning to quit his job as a teacher and run his wife's company. First, they found out that I sold my company for pennies. Since I sold it to the employees, they couldn't do anything. Then they found out that my parents had been replaced with new ones that had nothing to do with the old ones, so there was no infringement. They will have to continue working as teachers. This was a big blow to the jerk. Kate felt that she deserved all the bad things that happened to her. She was ashamed of her betrayal. She felt ashamed for lying and deceiving me. She felt ashamed for fighting for the divorce and causing me more pain and suffering. She absolutely did not want to marry the jerk, but she felt that she had to do it. Otherwise, what would be the meaning of everything she experienced? Destroy your marriage and burn your life to the ground for no reason. No, at least by getting married, she could pretend that everything worked out for the better. But when Dawn took Kate to her future husband, he knew something was wrong. Kate seemed to be in a trance. It was almost like she was in a dream. Dawn wondered if she was taking illegal substances, but dismissed the thought. Kate was never interested in this. She disappeared before the bride and groom's first dance, and Emily and my mother went looking for her. I shook my head at all this nonsense. I loved Kate with a deep romantic love that was constant and unbreakable. So life moved on. The girls continued to study in college. My new patents were successful, and we doubled the new company's sales. And I started dating. People told me that I would have no problem finding a partner, but I didn't believe them. My daughters convinced me to sign up for Tinder, Bumble, and a few other sites. They wrote my profile and took a couple thousand photos to find the right ones for my profile. I went on a few dates, but was not happy with the women who showed interest in me. I got back into shape, lost weight, and was back to my college weight. I knew that I looked more than decent and considered myself a good match, but the women I dated were not what I was looking for. My friend Terry Carr decided to focus on trusts and estate planning and gradually retired from practicing law, representing my business interests. When I asked him to recommend a lawyer in Austin, he did not hesitate to recommend the firm my father worked with. They are the best in the state, if not the country. You couldn't find a better representation. With this approval, I asked my father to arrange a meeting with someone who could represent my business interests. The lawyer I met with was Elizabeth Garcia. Elizabeth was not as tall as Kate, but she was also slim and athletic. She had dark brown hair and a light tan with almond-shaped green eyes. She was exotic, beautiful, and I couldn't understand her as a lawyer. Lawyers can't meet with clients, and I was captivated by her. After 2 dates, we became exclusive. After 6 dates, we knew we were going to get married. I was 43 and Elizabeth was 32. Elizabeth was also divorced. She married another lawyer, but discovered that his main reason for pursuing her was in hopes of a partnership with Bonham, McLeod, Garcia. When he realized he couldn't use her for a promotion, much less a partnership, he started cheating on her. The divorce was quick and painless for Elizabeth. It was painful for her husband to the point that he moved to California. Marriage to an older man was not a problem for Elizabeth. One of her ancestors, Angelica Garcia, was 10 years younger than her husband, Robert Bonham, who founded the law firm Bonham, McLeod, Garcia nearly 200 years ago. When I was dating Elizabeth, I sometimes thought about my past life, married to Kate and living in Fort Worth with my daughters and my company. My parents and Kate's parents lived nearby, just a few minutes away by car. I thought I had found happiness, but everything has changed. My parents divorced. I barely spoke to my mother. When talking, she complained about reconciliation with Kate. Kate's parents were going through hard times, and from what I heard, divorce was also on the agenda. They missed their granddaughters and their old life. And Kate, after being discharged from the hospital, she returned to live with her parents. The idiot wasn't happy about it. His dissatisfaction increased when she filed for an annulment. 18 months after our divorce was finalized and 15 months after my suicide attempt, Kate showed up on my doorstep. When I opened the door on Saturday morning, I was stunned to see my ex-wife with a rolling suitcase next to her. "Kate, what are you doing here?" I asked. I was stunned by her presence. "I know I owe you a lot. I've been the worst wife in the world and a terrible mother to our daughters. I'm here to make things right." I didn't know what to say to this. I just stood there with my mouth open. "Honey, who's at the door?" My wife's voice brought me back to reality. Elizabeth entered the hallway. She was wearing dark blue leggings and a white tank top, her pregnant belly jutting out. I had the procedure done so I wouldn't have children, but after our honeymoon I had the surgery reversed, knowing Elizabeth wanted a child, even though I thought I might be too old. She convinced me no. I looked at Kate standing in the doorway, then at my wife standing in the hallway with a curious look on her face. This is someone I was once married to, I replied, closing the door softly. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one.